Hi everyone, this is audapostrophe. Let's continue our game of Chaos Head Noah running on Nintendo Switch. There was something I had to look up. It was the idea I'd had back at school, the one that might give me a hint towards finding the D-sword. Is it possible to turn the thoughts in your head into a video? What Senna had told me before VR technology and how humans run on electricity felt like it could be a good starting point.
何してるの?
Remy stood up and walked over to me. Should I explain? But how to explain? It felt like it would be a big pain in the ass.
ねえねえ、何してるか教えてよ。
Since I didn't answer, Remy started poking me in the back with her finger. I couldn't just ignore her, right?
君は妄想が現実になるって信じられる?
I kept typing search words into the browser instead of looking back at her. If anything, I was looking at Sedatan as I spoke.
妄想が現実に? 無理でしょう。もしそれができたら、人はとっくに万能になってるよ。
Anything they wanted, huh? That might be true. In your delusions, you could do anything, no matter how unreal. If those delusions could become real, that would mean the unreal could become real too.
それがどうしたの?
それに近いシステムがアメリカで特許あるんだ。
へえ、冗談でしょ。
I wasn't looking at her, but I could sense her give me a sigh of disbelief. I decided to show her the image of the patent that Shiho had found for me.
これは?
特許の証拠写真。
え、本当に?
She leaned forward and stared at the monitor. Her head was now right next to mine.
あ、私英語って苦手。すごいね、タク。英語読めるなんて。
She was so close. I could even see the sparkle in her eyes as the monitor's light reflected off them. My heart skipped a beat again.
ねえねえ、どういうことか教えてよ。
She seemed to have taken an interest. I tried my best not to think about how close she was, moving my head so that I could see both Sedatan and the monitor at all times.
生まれながらに盲目の人でもビデオカメラみたいな映像機器を通すことでそこに映る景色が見えるようになるんだ。これ豆知識な。
ビデオカメラが目の代わりっていうこと？
そう。VR 技術って言うんだよ。
へえ。もし本当だったらすごいな。
It is true. Senna said that they'd even succeeded in testing it.
でも、機械を使って目が見えるようになるのと、妄想が現実になるってどうつながるの？私、頭悪いからよくわかんないや。
As I explained my theory to Remy, I kept on typing keywords into the search engine, but nothing was coming up. I kept going anyway.
映像機器に映る景色も脳内で思い浮かべた妄想も電気信号だから。逆に考えるんだ。脳内に電気信号を送るんじゃなくて、脳内から電気信号を送るって考えるんだ。
ほほう。
Her responses were dull and almost blank. Maybe she didn't understand at all. I was tired of explaining things to her, so I just stopped talking and focused on my research. I didn't really need her to understand anyway. It was just an idea I'd come up with. Mimi was still nodding and murmuring even though I'd stopped talking. I decided to just ignore her. But no matter how much I searched, I couldn't find anything to back up my theory. I decided to change my approach and look at patents instead of just web pages. I went to the English site that Chiho had told me about that had a list of patents. I would look and see if anything there could give me any hints.
あ、
After following a bunch of links, I finally found something similar to what Shiho had shown me before. It was a different patent document than the one for the VR device. I decided to read it immediately.
神経信号パルスを遠隔地からモニターし、それを映像及び音声として再現する装置と方法。
おー
It was just what I thought of. Or it was just what I thought of. I leaned forward out of my chair.
これ、すごいぞ。
すごいの？何が何が？
簡単に言うと、これ、他人の思考を盗撮する技術だ。
思考を盗撮。
In other words, you could use a special device to take a look at the images and sounds inside of a person's head. And it even said you could monitor these nerve impulses from satellites. With this, you could read the mind of anybody on Earth.
本当にそんなことできるの？ SF 小説とかそういう類のものなんじゃ？
特許ってそのシステム自体が完全に仕上がってないと絶対に取得できないんだって。
Oh, that's what I'd read when I looked up patents online.
だからこれもちゃんとシステムが確立されてるってことだよ。
This wasn't fiction. If you had the money and technological prowess to make the system, you could do it anytime you wanted. I remembered what Senna had said.
ある意図的な情報を神経パルスへコンバートすることが可能なら、人の五感すべて、さらには人の意志そのものもコントロールできるんじゃないか。
I hadn't found any source to confirm or deny that, so it was just a guess. But the theory I'd come up with had a source. Why wasn't this incredible news anywhere to be found in Japan? It felt like you could win a Nobel for it easily. I decided to search for things involving mind reading. What I found was a record of an American court proceeding.
また英文だ。頭痛くなってきそうだよ。
It was pretty long, so I didn't feel like trying to read it all. I decided to use translation software on it, even if it meant I might end up with something a little off. The basic idea was something like this. Legal proceedings. Plaintiff, N.K. Rabin, defendant, United States Department of Defense, Central Intelligence Agency. Plaintiff's claims. My thoughts are being scanned by a special device, recorded and sent somewhere via satellite. I am a hostage of the satellites. I am exposed to attack by multiple satellites night and day. 1. Tracking. 2. Mind reading. 3. Observation of my entire body. 4. Biofrequency attacks. 5. Audio attacks. 6. Inducement of physical weakness. Beginning in late December 1990, I've been shown artificially created dreams, including audio, visual, and voice content during my sleep. Between the months of February and May 1992, I was a victim of biofrequency attacks, pain torture harassment. I recognized that these were attacks upon my person, and beginning in February 1992, I began to record the following in my notes: time, date, contents of particularly painful psychological attacks. These biofrequency attacks were performed upon every part of my body. The pain, torture, and harassment were finely tuned so that they could cause unpleasurable sensations, exhaustion, and pain to parts, and sometimes all of my body. The major parts of my body that were affected are as follows: chest, vision, abdomen, brain, to cause sleep disorders; brain, to cause me to have artificial dreams.
思考監視、思考盗撮、しかも国家ぐるみ。マジ？
私これ知ってる。何年か前に映画で見た。
That was just fiction, wasn't it? But these court proceedings were real. There were two possibilities. The plaintiff was just crazy, or it was all real. It was hard to tell which was true. After seeing the patent, it was probably real, but still. But Senna and Ayase weren't crazy, especially Ayase. Down that tunnel. I'd seen her split into two. I hadn't seen the moment it happened, but when I turned around, there was another Ayase. And I'd seen her pull the D-sword out from nowhere too. That wasn't a hallucination or a delusion. After seeing that, I couldn't call her crazy. But there was also what she'd said.
これも君の妄想よ。
So that strange thing I'd witnessed had happened because I'd seen it in my delusions.
理想度は力を持つ人の目にしか映らない。君には私の剣が見えているでしょう。それが意味するのは一つだけ。
Was that what Ayase meant by power? The power to project illusions into reality, and it was possible that I had it? No. I was jumping to conclusions. Maybe there was a system that could use science to turn delusions into video footage, but that didn't mean psychic powers were real.
見つけなくちゃいけない。自分自身。方法なんて私にもわからない。
But if maybe the way to get a D sword involves some kind of psychic power. And if I had that power, it might be worth trying. I went and picked up the toy D-sword in the corner of the room. I stood in the middle of the room and held it out in front of me, in the best approximation of an ESO character that I could do. Okay, time to envision a sword. Rimi was looking at me. Our eyes met. She was grinning. I could feel my face getting warm. I picked up the sword and posed with it, forgetting that there was someone else in the room with me. In Rimi's eyes, I must look like a total weirdo. Maybe. Crap. I put down the sword. I was too embarrassed to look at her. I wanted to be anywhere in the world but where I was standing right now. Or maybe I could just get her to pretend she'd never seen it. I was willing to beg if I had to. But Rimi decided just to make things worse.
ねえねえ、チャンバラごっこ？
I shook my head.
いつもそういうことしてるの？
Again, I shook my head.
今日が初めて？
I nodded fiercely.
チャンバラごっこの相手役、私がしようか？よくわからないけど。
I shook my head back and forth violently. I just told her it wasn't pretend fighting.
ねえたく、どうしてこっち見てくれないのかな？
Because I'm embarrassed, obviously. She'd seen something I really didn't want her to see. This must be what it felt like when a girlfriend found her boyfriend's porn.
たくってさ、
Was she disgusted by me? Oh, this was the worst. I had to find some way to help her realize it was a misunderstanding.
かわいいね。
え？
かなりキュンときちゃったな。今のは。
She picked up the Sedaton body pillow that was next to my computer chair and was hugging it tightly. I thought she was making fun of me, but from the way she was acting, she was serious. Did that mean that Rimi had found me moe for a second? I was relieved. She hadn't started hitting me. Good.
そもそもそれ、どこで買ってきたの？高かったんじゃない？
1万円。渋谷の雑貨屋で。
へえ、1万円か。安いのか高いのかわからないけど。でもそんな大きなおもちゃが普通に売ってるんだね。私、そんな大きなのを直接見たのって初めて。その雑貨屋さんに売ってるっていうのは誰かに教えてもらったの？
She was really interested in this. Was she interested in swords like these? Maybe she was secretly an otaku herself. She'd kind of made fun of me while I was holding it, but maybe she actually wanted one of her own. Wow, that's really tsundere. Lol.
自分で調べた。ネットで。
ネットか。すごいな。何でも情報が手に入るんだね。私は全然ダメ。パソコンなんてろくに使えないよ。で、その剣って流行ってるの？
なんで？
タクはどうしてそれを買おうと思ったのかなって。
Should I tell her the truth? If she was going to stay with me, she might end up looking for the real D sword with me too. Maybe I should tell her.
これは偽物だけど、本物があるんだ。
本物？
Remy seemed a little confused.
本物を持ってる人を僕知ってるんだ。二人いる同じ学校の女子。
女子ね。女の子がこんなおもちゃを欲しがるかな。
本当なんだ。それにおもちゃじゃない。
あ、ごめん。
本物は光るんだ。それにすごい存在感で。僕、それを探してる。それさえ手に入れれば、僕は救われるんだ。
救われるって。
Remy looked surprised by what I was saying, but I was totally serious. Having a D sword would give me a way to fight back against Shogun.
それで、
I want you to help me find it is what I wanted to say. But the thought of her saying no made me so scared that I couldn't ask. I threw the fake sword down on the ground and sat on the sofa. Then I sighed and closed my eyes. Maybe Remy would volunteer to help me find it? That'd make things so much easier. Maybe that was too much to hope for. But Remy had appeared out of nowhere to help me before when I needed her most. So maybe...
とにかく、もし本物があったとしても、それこそ買ったりしちゃダメだよ。今タクが持ってるのはおもちゃだからいいけど、本物ってことは銃刀法違反になっちゃうんだから。
My hopes were mercilessly dashed. A sob. Remy, I'm disappointed in you. Well, her reaction was the one most people would have. The only reason I felt differently was because, after all the weird things that had happened over the past few weeks, I believed what Senna and Ayase said. I just had to find the D sword myself.
それでタク。
I could feel Remy sitting down next to me.
その本物の剣を持ってる女子って、誰かな？
Her voice was coming right next to me, and she was sitting right beside me. We were alone in a dark room, just the two of us, and she was sitting right next to me. Oh, hold on a minute. Emergency. We have an emergency here.
特に女子の知り合いが、私以外にいたなんて、ちょっとびっくり。もしかして、彼女？
Did she have to ask that? Was she trying to tempt me, maybe? Why was she talking about girlfriends? Was she maybe going to tell me she wanted to be my girlfriend? And then there'd be a romantic mood between us, and then... No, I wasn't ready for that. I opened my eyes and shook my head. Both Ayase and Senna were very mysterious. Also a little crazy, probably. If they were 2D characters, they'd be really moe, but not in 3D. Especially Senna. Just talking to her terrified me. She felt like she could beat me up at any moment. I didn't want to get involved with her at all if I could avoid it.
そっか。ちょっと、安心したかな。
え？
What did she just say? Oh crap, oh crap. My whole body froze. This was leading where I thought it was, right? She meant what I thought she meant, right? She was trying to get me to say something here, right? What was I supposed to say? Was I supposed to give her the answer she wanted to hear? I mean, I liked the idea, but I didn't know if I was up for dating a 3D girl. I glanced over at Rimi, unsure of what to say. Wait, you can't sit like that. It's not fair. Well, like that? The way she was sitting with her legs up in that short skirt, Miss Sakihata, I think I can almost see your panties. Actually, depending on the angle, it almost looked like she wasn't wearing any at all. My eyes kept heading down toward the triangle at the base of her thighs, her V-zone. I tried desperately not to give in to the temptation. The way she was sitting. It reminded me of the cover of a famous H game. It was called Throwaway Sister, and it was famous enough to get an anime. Its first edition package had the heroine sitting just like Rimi was now. That illustration was so moe. I'd even used it as my PC wallpaper for a while.
ねえ、タク。
はい。
Crap, I let my panic show in my voice. But you can't blame me, right? There was a 3D girl right next to me, looking up at me questioningly. It's so cute. I'm going to die of moe. She's not even 2D. I even thought my libido was roaring at full power. Rimi's next words were...
タクは、自分の未来を考えたことある？
え？
例えば、人を含めてすべての生き物は生きてるだけで何かを傷つけてるんだよ。
There was a sorrow in her voice. What was she trying to say?
わかる？
だから
ね。無理しないでいいからね。
Did she mean I didn't have to force myself to go to school? Or that I shouldn't force myself to spend hours grinding in ESO and instead try to lead a healthier lifestyle? Or maybe even that I shouldn't force myself to stay in control, and if I wanted to take her right there, I could? Nah, that last one was impossible. She stretched expansively, then jumped to her feet. The hem of her skirt was waving right in front of me.
私、喉乾いてきちゃった。何か飲み物ある？
I stood up and headed over to where the fridge was. I looked down into the fridge. I had a thing of soda, but I'd already drank from it. Giving it to her would be weird.
ないなら買ってこようかな。コンビニって深センの駅前にあったよね。
I could sense Rimi standing up behind me.
ちょっと行ってくる。
She smiled and left the room without waiting for my answer. Being alone with a girl was exhausting. And Rimi, I don't know if she realized it or not. Probably not. But the way she acted sometimes was bad for my heart.
くんか。
I sniffed the area of the room. It smelled like flowers, or at least it seemed like it did. This was what a girl smelled like. This was Rimi's scent. Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in.
最低だ。
I sunk into my chair, disgusted at myself. I was supposed to be sitting here, terrified of Shogun and Yua, and now I was all excited. I decided to do some more research on mind reading while Rimi was out on her run to the store. I turned towards the PC and noticed that Grim was in the chat room calling for me. I sighed and entered the chat room. Ah, you're finally here. You took way too long, Nightheart. My mind's been going, whose eyes are those, this whole time thanks to you. Damn it, what does he mean to go, whose eyes are those? You just wanted to say that. Every time I see those words, it scares me. What's your new info? NewGen stuff, of course. It's happened. The 5th murder. I felt the same dark terror I always felt, but I also felt confused. I had felt sure Shogun and Yua were going to come after me next, but instead they'd gone after someone else. Of course, it was hard to say if I should be happy about that or not. It's on the top page of Taboo News. You'll find it easily if you look. When did it happen? They found the body last night, but the victim died the day before.
待て待て
And this is another crazy one. You see, they took out the guy's brain. I panicked as Grim started to give me the details without any warning. I'd already heard and seen enough disgusting stuff. I didn't even want to hear about it. If I did, I might end up imagining it happened to me too. I didn't even have my D-sword yet either. But Grim continued, oblivious. And here's where it gets really scary. How do you think they died? Malnutrition. They survived losing their brain. My body shook with fear. I pulled my knees close to me and wrapped my arms around them. I didn't want to hear any more. Just please leave me alone. My HP was already at 0. So they were in something like a state of brain death. They might have stuck like that for over a week. With no brain. They can't eat and drink, and their body just rotted away from malnutrition. Atchan already named it brain dead. They're calling it LOL. Those guys pick the best names. And here's the funny part. The guy was a psychiatrist. A psychiatrist losing his brain. Talk about ironic. A psychiatrist, looking at the words, made my heart race. Maybe I was overthinking things, but I didn't want to know. But part of me felt like I had to. I hesitated for a long time, but finally clicked the link about the brain dead story at the top of Taboo News. Body man found in Shibuya, 5th NewGen case. Fumio Takashina, 41, a psychiatrist at Tokyo General Hospital, was found collapsed on a Shibuya street early on the morning of the 23rd. Police have stated that he died from malnutrition. Mr. Takashina's skull had been cleanly cut open and the brain removed. The police stated that there was a possibility that the body had remained alive after the brain's removal in a similar state to brain death. Investigators revealed that Takashina had been absent from work starting the 10th of this month. Shibuya has been the subject of national attention since last month when a series of bizarre murders called the New Generation Madness began. The police are treating this murder as potentially related.
なんてことだ。なんて。
The victim's name was Fumio Takashina. It was Dr. Takashina. Dr. Takashina had been killed. They were taunting me. Shogun was clearly taunting me. He'd killed Dr. Takashina, the man I was counting on to help me, just to scare me more.
そんな。そんな。助けて。誰か助けてくれ
I screamed. My head felt like it was tearing itself apart. I was going crazy.
ああやだやだやだ死にたくないよ死にたくないリミ助けて
I looked around the room for Rimi. I kept looking and looking and looking. She wasn't here. She wasn't here. She wasn't here. Why wasn't she here? She'd left to go to the store. I fell to the ground, head in my hands.
僕を助けて、リミ。助けてよ。どこにも行かないで。頼むよ。
There was an answer. I gasped and looked up, and Remy was standing right next to me, holding a bag from the store.
リミ。
She was back. Relieved, I stretched out a hand. Remy crouched down and took it with both hands. The last time I touched them, Remy's hands were cold. But now they seemed so warm.
ここにいる。私は、ここにいるから。怯えないで。
Remy smiled gently at me and wiped my tears away with her fingers. I was really pathetic. Crying, screaming, being afraid like this in front of a girl. But Remy said she'd be with me anyway. Right now, the only thing keeping my mind from shattering was this warmth. I didn't want to let go of this hand, not until I had the D-sword. Something very strange was happening at Miyashita Park in the depths of night. Whose eyes are those? 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 A large group was huddled in the middle of the park. There were at least 100 people there, probably more. Most of them were in their teens. Some were in their high school uniforms, while others were wearing, while other girls were wearing fashionable clothes. There were boys wearing Otaka-style glasses too, and even Gangura girls, a rare sight these days. From a distance, it looked like some kind of local event, but if you got up close, you'd realize just how strange it was. Everyone was looking down at the ground with blank stares on their faces. There were so many people here, but nobody was talking to each other. They were just standing there unmoving. Everyone was smiling a little as they mumbled and muttered to themselves. They were all endlessly repeating the same words. Whose eyes are those? There was no emotion in their voices. The words came out of the mouths of 100 people, flat and toneless as a monk reciting a sutra. Of course, there was almost nobody else in the park, probably because they didn't want anything to do with this strange crowd. The women cutting through the park on the way home from work, the old ladies walking their dogs, they all turned and ran when they saw this bizarre sight. There was one man, though, who was watching them carefully. He seemed to have some involvement with the group, but he was standing a good distance away. He was wearing an outfit that would have fit right in at Akihabara. Plain shirt, jeans, beat-up sneakers, fingerless gloves, and a red bandana, with a huge green backpack on his back. He was badly overweight, and his shirt buttons seemed like they might burst at any moment. It was late October, so the weather was cold, and he was sweating and constantly wiping his forehead down with his hand towel. He seemed worried about something, as every few seconds he would look around and check over his shoulder. Between these checks, though, he would let his shoulders sway and grin with joy. There was another sound in the park alongside the strange chanting coming from the group. It was the sound of some kind of machinery, and it was coming from his backpack. Another team came into the park, this one a teenage girl with an unbuttoned blazer. She walked right towards the rest of them, showing no signs of fear at the strange chanting. Her long black hair flowed in the wind with every step she took. For some reason, she had a half-eaten popsicle in her hand. The group ignored her completely. They were lost in their own world, endlessly repeating the same phrase over and over. The fact that they ignored her didn't seem to bother her at all. When she got close to the group, she suddenly stopped. She stood for a moment, eating her popsicle with an air of indifference. You could hear the sound of crunching ice coming from her mouth while she took a bite. When she finished her popsicle, she looked at the stick, then grunted in frustration and threw it on the ground. Her gaze was sharp as she examined each individual in the crowd.
Oi! Nanda yo, omae!
The man with the backpack screamed as if he couldn't take it anymore. The girl, Sena Aoi, had noticed that he was the only person paying attention to her. She snorted derisively at him, then suddenly crossed her hands and stretched them out in front of her. The space around her hand seemed to blur slightly, and the fuzzy outline of a metallic pole began to appear out of thin air. It passingly resembled a hoe, or maybe a shovel, but it didn't really look like either of them. It was a sharp blade that split just above the handguard. The blur faded away and the weapon became solid. Senna grabbed it tight with both hands. But that wasn't all. Both ends of the blade she was holding, as well as the space off its right side, began to glow with a blue light. More metal parts appeared in the glowing space, just like before. Then, with a heavy clanking, they fused together to the first blade. In the end, they formed a ring, and a long trail of light stretched out to its right. The long blade split as in half appeared alongside the light. What had started as a sort of hoe or shovel had now become a massive sword. Sharp and elegant, pure and destructive, terrible and beautiful. The impossibly large weapon was now held tightly in Senna's hands. The man with the backpack didn't react. He simply frowned and stared at Senna.
関係者じゃないだろ。あっち行けよ。
The tone of his voice, which was high-pitched for a man, was arrogant and brash. He waved a hand, shooing her off. Senna quietly opened her mouth to speak.
お前が責任者か
It was more of a rhetorical question than an actual one. Her eyes were locked on the man in the backpack. He started to get scared.
答えろ畑野はどこだ
The man went pale and stepped back, but didn't answer her question. The crowd continued to murmur, "Whose eyes are those?" without showing the slightest bit of interest in them. If anything, it seemed possible the crowd didn't even see them at all. Senna and the backpack man were both staring at each other. The first to look away was the backpack man.
誰だよそれ。例えしてても教えないけどな。
Senna fell silent, swinging the sword around to her front and taking the fog stance. She bent her knees and leaned forward.
誤解するな
The sword glowed again. Instead of the pale light it had been at first, it was now red-violet. It was a sudden sound, like a woman's high-pitched scream. The air shook. There wasn't any sort of metaphor or smile. The air was physically moving. The space itself had begun vibrating, centering around Senna's sword. The blade's red light had become so intense that it was hard to look at. Senna let out a small breath, and then she gritted her teeth hard. The noise grew louder. Lightning bolts raced from the blade. A sonic wave blasted the air itself. The vibrating sound stopped immediately afterwards. But the blade was still flashing red, like a pulsing vein. Senna slowly pointed the sword towards the man with the backpack. The crowd around them, which had been ignoring them thus far, they ran from the park without knowing what had happened. Senna ignored them, keeping her eyes fixed on the man with the backpack. The man had been indifferent before, but now he was very afraid. His face was pale, and he was slowly stepping away from her, shaking his head as if to say no.
待って俺は畑野なんてやつ本当に知らないんだただ指示されただけ
誤解するなと言ったはず
Senna ignored the man's pleas.
質問したのはただの挨拶代わりだお前が何を答えたってそれを壊すことに変わりはない
There was a fierce light in her eyes. The man with the backpack screamed pathetically before he turned and ran. But the direction he'd chosen was right towards the stampeding crowd. With nowhere to run, he froze. But then, Senna had already leapt towards him, closing the distance in an instant. Her strike was quick and powerful, so strong and so fast that it was hard to believe. It came from her frail body. She swung her blade in an arc, slicing through the man's backpack and destroying what was inside. The impact blew the man backwards. He fell on the ground, curling up in a ball and shivering. He didn't have the strength left to run. Oh, am I out of battery? Oh, jeez. Give me a second. He fell to the ground, curling up in a ball and shivering. He didn't have the strength left to run. He'd pissed himself in fear, and a damp spot was forming on his pants. Senna walked over to him, showing no interest in the man himself. Instead, she looked down at what was left at his backpack. There was a machine inside, shooting out small plumes of sparks. It looked something like a bulky modem, but now it had been smashed to useless pieces by Senna's sword. The loud mechanical noise emanating from it a moment ago was now nowhere to be heard.
Nozomi.
She whispered this name to no one in particular. There was hatred in her voice. Let's see, 810, name, anonymous afternoon. As autumn grew deeper, the air got colder. It was hard to believe that I'd been wearing short sleeves just a short while ago. The sky above me was hazy. It's like its colors were starting to fade. The leaves at the park were brightly colored, though maybe the trees were stealing the color from the sky. I looked up at the sky and jammed a toothbrush in my mouth. The nice thing about the base was that I had the whole roof to myself without worrying that anybody would see me. The sink was on the shipping crates outside, which made it rough when it rained, but on days when the weather was clear, I would always brush my teeth indoors. I rubbed my sleepy eyes as I brushed my teeth, remembering what happened yesterday. Mimi had stayed with me until late at night. She'd even held my hand for the hour or so it had taken me to calm down. She'd gone home without anything else happening, though. A boy and a girl in the same room for hours, and nothing romantic happened at all. If I had the conversational skills necessary to make something happen, though, I would have had a girlfriend ages ago. If anything, I was disgusted at myself for hoping something would happen at all. Rimi was trying to help me purely as a friend. Rimi offering to stay with me was one of the few things even keeping me together. Having that support made a huge difference. Despite the shock of Dr. Takashina dying in the brain-dead murder, a day later I was actually feeling fairly stable. Maybe it was because my head was full of all that stuff I'd read in the patents and the courts. The power to project illusions into reality? Did it really exist? Was Shogun after me because I had it? If I did have that power, memories from when I was young came back to me. The day I hadn't been able to go on the field trip, the day I was the only one who didn't get into the accident. The bus had crashed, and all my classmates had gotten hurt. My teacher, Mr. Saito, had died. I'd seen the images in my head so clearly. I could see every detail. Was that really just me seeing the future? If, maybe, that wasn't me seeing the future, but just my delusion. And what if I'd made that delusion a reality? My whole body felt like it was about to start shaking. I wrapped my arms around myself to keep my body still.
だとしたら僕は
I was a murderer.
おはよ
Rimi was there. She was incredibly cheerful for it to be this early in the morning. Seeing her smile made my shaking stop. It was so strange. Normally I couldn't stand being around 3D girls, but for some reason being with Rimi made me feel much better.
う。迎えに来たよ。なんでポッカーンってしてるの？
Oh, right. According to my schedule, today was a school day. When I told Rimi about that yesterday.
迎えに来てあげるって言ったよね。
Right. Thanks to Shogun, I was afraid to even go outside now. But that's why Rimi had offered to stay with me. She was keeping her promise.
まさか本当に来るとは思わなかったとか？ビシッ。残念でした。こう見えても私、尽くすタイプなんだ。
She gave me a mischievous wink. Was this an H game? In the real world, your female classmate didn't come to pick you up on the way to school. It would have been even better if she'd come into my room when I was still asleep and woken me up. But you can't have everything, I guess. As I lost myself in my silly delusions, Rimi suddenly looked up at the sky. She was looking at something far away again.
冬の空が色あせたように見えるのはどうしてだと思う？
Sunlight contains a spectrum of 7 colors, the same colors as seen in the rainbow. For those 7 colors to reach the human eye, they have to pass through Earth's atmosphere. When that happens, a phenomenon called scattering occurs. Basically, the light collides with the molecules in the air and gets bent in random directions. And when the light bends in random directions, it starts flying all over the place. The more it scatters, the easier it is for it to enter the human eye. The colors which scattered most easily were purple and blue. That's why the sky was blue. I am very smart. But Rimi's answer was very different from my dull scientific one.
きっと寒くてみんなが下を向いちゃうから青を望む人の数が減っちゃうの。
Rimi had said something like that before, but when was it again?
だから寒くても上を向いて歩こう。
I quickly changed, and Rimi and I left the Kurenai building together. Going to school with a girl was something normal people did. I was still scared of Shogun and Yua, and I hated them and wished they would die. I mean it, too. It wasn't just something I was saying, but thanks to them, I was able to experience what a normal person's life was like. Maybe I could be a little grateful, just a little. Or at least I tried to make myself think that way. But when I did, Dr. Takashina's face came back to me, and any joy I felt slipped away. It might have been my fault he was killed. Dr. Takashina was connected to me, so Shogun had killed him, either as a warning or a way to provoke me. I was overcome with fear and worry. Little by little, I was starting to fall behind Rimi. I took a quick glance at the back of her head. What kind of look was on her face? She was humming a song. It was a song from the Phantasm CD I'd lent her last night. Her steps looked light and carefree. We weren't even talking. How could she seem so happy? Looking at her helped my worries a little. But to be honest, why was she being so nice to me? Was the answer inside my memories of her? The ones that I didn't remember? Okay. Yeah, we have another page. Alright, why don't we stop it there. This is Audapostrophe. You've been watching Chaos Head Noah running on Nintendo Switch. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed watching. I will see you at the next stream.